Well, why we said in previous lesson that the assumptions under the traditional development model are very strong. It's just because we live in a world characterized by four key aspects that are also defined VUCA, that stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. This acronym was introduced in the 80s by the US Army to identify the war perceived after the end of the Cold War. We live in a world that is volatile. Volatility refers to the nature and dynamics of change in a given context. The greater the volatility, the faster the changes. We live in a world that is uncertain. Uncertainty indicates the extent to which the future can be predicted with confidence. The more uncertain the world is, the harder it is to predict. We live in a world that is complex. A context is more complex as more numerous and different are the factors to be taken into account, and more numerous the relationship between the elements. The more complex the world is, the harder it is to be analyzed. We live in a world that is ambiguous. A situation is ambiguous when the information is incomplete, contradictory, or inaccurate to arrive at conclusion. So, what is Agile? The term Agile was introduced in the Manifesto for Agile Software Development, published in 2001. It was created by software engineers to take a more flexible approach to product creation that was better able to adapt to a dynamic, complex, uncertain environment, allowing for more efficient product and service development. The values and principles set out in the manifesto are derived from and include a wide range of frameworks, such as Scrum, Kanban, and extreme programming. Let's step back for an interesting brief history of Agile. We move back to early 1940s, when Hideo Deming, US engineering and manager, best known for his work in Japan, introduced the so-called Deming Cycle, or PDCA, acronym that stands for Plan, Do, Check, Act. That was an iterative four-step management method for the control and continuous improvement of processes and products. In particular, the third and fourth step were the check and act, meaning that after the production, it was needed a verification on the work done and an adaptation of the process for the next iteration. These anticipated two of the three Scrum pillars that were introduced later on: respect and adapt. In the 1950s, Toyota introduced a new working method called Toyota Production System, which consisted in producing according to just-in-time and Kaizen, that means continuous improvement techniques. This was in contrast to Western industries, especially in the US, where the tailors for this model prevailed. In this case, a large amount of raw materials were used, producing the goods on large scale and then trying to sell them on the market, often with uncertain results, overproduction, and excess inventories. Later on, in the 1990s, have appeared different agile practices, often independently of each other. These methodologies emphasize the closer collaboration between IT and business, the need for frequent releases of value to the customer, self-organizational teams, and so on. The most important practices were Scrum, Kaizen, extreme programming, adaptive software development, feature-driven development, and so on. In particular, Kees Weber and Jeff Sutherland began experimenting with a new approach to project management called Scrum, presenting it for the first time at a conference in Texas in 1995. As anticipated, in 2001, 17 exponents of different agile practices that matured during the 1990s met in Smallbird, US, to discuss their different practices and came to a common manifesto made up of 4 values and 12 agile principles. Among them, there were Kees Weber and Jeff Sutherland. The Manifesto for Agile Software Development still nowadays remains the main official reference and source of inspiration for any initiative that intends to qualify as Agile. The year after, Kees Weber founded the Scrum Alliance, a non-profit organization with a mission to develop and sustain the Scrum framework. But 7 years later, he left the Scrum Alliance due to disagreements with the organization board and founded Scrum.org by launching his training and certification programs on Scrum. In 2009, Ken Schwaber and Jeff Sutherland published the first edition of Scrum Guide, that is the official knowledge body of Scrum, that nowadays is in its 2017 edition. Then, in 2011, Dean Leffingwell introduced the SAFe, Scale Agile Framework, which is a framework to scale Agile projects from a single team to multiple teams working on common products. In 2013, another framework was introduced to scale Scrum projects. Its name is LESS, Large Scale Scrum. In the meantime, the new economies companies improved and evolved their Agile models customized based on their context. So we arrive at the Agile Manifesto. It's noteworthy to read it. We are uncovering better ways of developing software by doing it and helping others do it. Through this work, we have come to value individuals and interactions over processes and tools, working software over comprehensive documentation, customer collaboration over contract negotiation, responding to change over following a plan. That is, while there is value in the items on the right, we value the items on the left more. In the last sentence, there is its interpretation. In Agile, there is still focus on the processes and tools, on documentation, on contracts and on plans. But there is most focus on the individuals and on the interaction and collaboration between them, on producing the so-called working software that is real, consistent, and a usable piece of functionality, on the collaboration between IT and business, client and contractors, and on being flexible and reactive to changes. In summary, it's a myth that in Agile there is no production of documentation, but Agile favorites a lean and practical documentation. Another myth is that Agile bans the planning. Rather, the planning in Agile for sure is performed, but is not made up front and immutable, but done and revisited continuously in order to better adapt to the changing product and market context. The sprint planning and daily scrums are two examples of Agile planning. Besides the 4 values, the Agile Manifesto is also made up of 12 principles. Together, values and principles are part of the learning concept and practices of the Scrum framework. Let's read them now. First principle is customer satisfaction. Second principle is changes and requirements are welcome. Then frequent release of value. Close business IT collaboration. Trust and motivation among team resources. Face-to-face conversations. A working software is best measure of progress. Agile processes promote sustainable development. Continued attention to technical excellence. Always aim for simplicity. Self-organized teams. And last but not least, frequent inspections and adaptation. Well, which is the adoption of different Agile frameworks and practices? Here, we are looking at the statistics taken from the 13th Annual State of Agile report, a well-known yearly report in the Agile field. The evidence is Scrum and hybrid Scrum XP frameworks with 64 adoption are the main Agile methodologies according to this report. In particular, we have 54% of Scrum adoption, 10% of an hybrid Scrum and XP adoption, 8% of Scrum plus Kanban hybrid, 5% of Kanban, and then we have all the others.